I was asked to come here and speak with you today about strategic innovation and scalable value. And in order to do that, I would like to tell a story about a research and development project I was part of some time ago. And it was a little bit ahead of its time, a little too early, but it ended up having some interesting influence on a much bigger idea that had started even decades earlier. So for the first 30 years of my career, I've been working pretty much on projects that have to do with creating new value in large corporations. And that's really the idea. We're supposed to create new growth, but make that work for that existing brand. And about 1995, one of the projects I got involved with was at the Walt Disney Company, and it was developing a virtual reality attraction, trying to help people have an experience where they could fly on a magic carpet in the world of Aladdin. And that led to work for this gentleman, a guy named Bran Farren. And Bran is a self-described creative technologist, and he's a real magnet for talent. And he had amazing people would come work for him, and Bran would inspire them to do research and development projects that invented the future. And he would tell us, avoid subtlety at all costs. And that was his one instruction. And this is how the R&D organization fit in the Disney company at the time. Our job was to look at the future of each of the different business units and really try to find the things that were important for all of them across the board. And then we did individual projects for the business units. Sometimes they would come and ask us to do things as well. The way we would sell our budget every year is we would come up with big ideas, things that we thought were important overall themes. And we would work on these with a really great team. And I can tell you, working at an entertainment R&D company is absolutely fun. We would come up with ideas for new rides and go make them and try them in the parking lot. We'd come up with ideas for how you could fly around. We would make simulators that would allow somebody to feel like they were being shot up in a rocket into space. You could scare your friends at the Haunted Mansion with some special effects. When the company decided to buy a television network, we started taking a look at what would happen 10 years ahead when broadband would happen. And news would start to happen online. And we built simulators of interactive TV that would allow for a view of the future of what that would be like. And we'd take these technologies, and sometimes we would turn them into internal tools. This was an idea for a VR cave, and the gentleman there is actually building a model of a future theme park, and it's employing the element of time so we can take a look at the way that the construction would actually happen and identify where there would be conflicts. We invented a multi-touch screen of our own, though we never figured out what the heck to do with it at the time. And we were asked to come up with ideas by divisions like consumer products when they wanted to come up with new lines of products. And we made lots and lots of robots. We were fascinated with the idea that the future of characters, because the Disney company was about providing experiences where you could interact with the places and characters that they'd created in their media. And we were always trying to figure out ways that we could make it so people could interact with those characters and get much closer to them. We experimented with artificial intelligence, magic tricks that could be done by a synthetic character or a little robot with a human. And one day I remember Bran came in and said, we need to make a dinosaur that's about 15 feet tall and it needs to free roam around the park. And we set out on a journey doing experiments with models and developing software. And a couple years later, the team had created the first four-legged autonomous robot. And we would look at how these different things would kind of merge together and how they would paint patterns of the technology going forward, new opportunities. And those turned into their own projects. And combined with incredible artistry, great sculptors, people who could create characters, fabricators who use the latest technologies and fabrication methods, new materials. We were able to create these amazing experiences that people could have in a theme park so that a kid could have an experience that they would remember for the rest of their life. And sometimes we would be asked to deal with some things that really weren't long-term in horizon. The R&D group is supposed to be there to take a look at the long-term, but inevitably there are short-term problems, and R&D is just a place with some smart people, so we would get asked to solve some problems. For example, fireworks. Fireworks are pretty, everybody likes them, but if you live next to where they're being shot up, there's a lot of smoke that comes from them. And so the people who are close to that don't exactly like it. And we had a team that took a look then at what would happen if you created a system that would use air pressure to launch those with precision. And as is typical, when we would get a project that was solving some problem, we'd also look at how it could make things better. And so the same system was able to use a precision computer timing so that each of the different explosions could happen exactly where we wanted it, thousands of feet in the sky, and you could do all kinds of new effects. So we learned to understand that what we were doing is really both either taking a look at where technology was going, and we'd try to track it, what we called a technology pull. Technology was pulling us in a certain direction, and we were trying to figure out where it was going. Or the projects we were doing when we were doing our best work were what we called technology push. And by that, we would try to find some experience that we thought was really important, that was something that would give somebody a great new experience. And we would try to get that image out there and then have it drive the technologies that we needed so we could make it happen. So this all has to be done with the essence of the brand. And I think this is a key thing when we start talking about scalable value, is that companies need to understand how they're really connecting with their customers, with their, in the Disney company's vernacular, their guests. And the history of connecting at the Disney company goes back to Walt Disney's experience himself. This is a picture of his daughter and his wife, and they're in the early Disneyland park. And if you take a look at their faces, they're all being kids together. And this is what was important to Walt. When his daughter was very young, he was frustrated because there was a local kind of carnival that would come to Los Angeles every year. And he would go and wait on a park bench while his daughter would go and get on the rides and have fun. And what he always wanted to do was have fun with his daughter. So the conception of the theme parks and all of the experiences that he was about had to do with children of all ages and creating magical experiences for parents of young kids and their young kids to do together. So those experiences include things like parades. They include things like theater shows that are at the parks. And both the philosophy of the Disney company and, it turns out, policy are interested in making sure that that's for everybody, including somebody who has a hearing impairment. So what you see there in this picture is a gentleman who's got a hearing impairment, and he has a closed captioning system to give him a text version of the show that's going on at the same time. And right about 1998, we all of a sudden heard from the theme parks division that the American Disabilities Act, a policy in the United States, was requiring that they implement the latest technology, and that's the way that policy works. You always have to keep putting forward the best technology available to make the best experience for people who have these disabilities. And it was going to cost a lot of money. So they asked us if there's some way that this technological disruption could become an opportunity. Is there some way, if we're going to put in all of this infrastructure, that we can make it something that would potentially be a great experience for everybody? Now, about that time, we were one of many organizations that was looking at the future of all of the technology around us. And everybody was getting frustrated with all the little gizmos we were carrying around. They all needed batteries and to be recharged, and it just seemed really obvious that somebody was going to figure out how all of those things came together. And in 1998, This is kind of what the state of the art was. Some people in here may remember. And so we set out to create a vision of what we wanted that better future to be. And we tried to answer the unmet wants, needs, and aspirations of our guests with magical experiences for parents and their young kids. And this project for us was called the Park PDA. So we created a slideshow that was a vision of what we thought that future should be, and we started to show it to all the different people that we needed to motivate to make this change happen. And we imagined that in the future you would use your interactive television to plan your vacation. Shortly after that, a cool little device would show up at your house, and it would allow you to start to experience the places that you'd planned to visit, give you samples of the media, your favorite characters. You'd be able to use it on the airplane for entertainment while you were on your way to your vacation. It would help you get around the airport easily in the new strange place. It would help you navigate to the theme park property, and once you got there, it would know where it was, and it would play your favorite song or have your favorite character greet you when you came to the property. Of course, you wouldn't have to wait in any queue lines to get into the hotel room. You could go to your favorite restaurants. It would have your menu in your language. You could make the purchase right there on the device. And really importantly, you could take pictures with it and start to collect all the memories of your vacation, because that's what people really did when they went to the park. They don't take pictures, they capture memories. In the morning when you have breakfast and a big fuzzy character comes up to see you and say hello, you can take a picture with them and they can leave an autograph on the device. You can review your pictures in the hotel, plan your day so you don't overplan, use it to be the ticket to get into the park, figure out how to get around the park and navigate, know what the wait times are, and importantly, learn about small items that are all around you that are of great interest but hard to get information about. You could interact with different parts of the park itself and play some games, buy things in the store, and we went on. And I think you're starting to see these are some of the things that we are familiar with today that have just become part of our life. And we imagined that you would go back home and you would be able to continue the vacation. You'd be able to go to a map and find all the photographs that you'd taken, located geographically on this collectible digital map, exactly where you'd taken them, so you could revisit the memories. And we started to imagine that people who would return year after year could kind of go through a little time trip every time they would go back and take a look at those spots. So this little slideshow we showed all around the company, and we used it to achieve what Chris Avery calls shared clarity of mission. And I think it's one of the things that designers do. It's our superpower, is that we can create a vision of something that hasn't happened yet, and then start to show it around so that complex things can happen that require the teamwork of lots and lots of people. So 1998, Bran also had approached then Chairman, Chief Executive Officer Michael Eisner, and convinced him that it would be to the advantage of the company if we brought in some of the great technological minds and scientists at that period of time. And all of a sudden I found that I was working with Danny Hillis, who's responsible for inventing parallel processing, Marvin Minsky, pioneer in artificial intelligence, and this gentleman, Alan Kay, who some of you might recognize. He's fairly well known as having done very important research work at Xerox's R&D facility in Palo Alto called Xerox PARC. And Alan was, in theory, working on the future of paper copies for the Xerox company. But while he was there, he and his team invented these things: the graphic user interface, the mouse, Ethernet, and object-oriented programming. But the problem was that Xerox couldn't figure out what to do with it, because instead of being able to see that they were really supposed to be working on the future of documents, they still saw themselves as a company that was based on working with paper. So Alan told me he called up his friend Steve Jobs and invited him to come over and see the stuff at lunch one day. And you kind of know what happens with the rest of the story, I think. And the reason that Alan was working on all those things while he was at Xerox is he was really after a much bigger idea. In 1968, Alan worked on a project for his own PhD, and it was a thesis, and it was called a Dinah Book. And he imagined that in the future, a better future, that kids would be able to use this very small, super powerful computer that was networked, and they would be able to actually write their own programs. And this was a vision that he set out on, and he continued to work on when I knew him and for all the years in between. And it was really about this fantastic big idea, and I don't know if I've ever heard of one that's more amazing. Alan had realized that every phase of human existence that was a significant change was based on the creation of a new literature. And that the characteristic of a new literature was when you had something, a language, where when you were able to read it, you got better at writing at it. And when you were able to write it, you would get better at reading it. And that computers didn't work this way. The problem with computers was if you use a software application, it didn't mean that you learned how to write one. And that the world was going to change in a significant way if we could make that happen. So about 1998, this is how far Alan's vision had gotten. And we showed him the slideshow that we've been working on, and he thought that that was pretty neat. And Alan kept up with all the changes that were happening in these devices that were kind of moving his vision a little bit forward at a time. And one day he came in with this. And we were blown away. It was a 4-inch color screen. Sharp had made this really exotic high-end product that was a touchscreen PDA. It had a camera, and it had a touchscreen and a color screen all together. And with that, he shared some really valuable things with us. Number one, he had a great relationship with R&D at Sharp. And so we got on a plane and we flew to Japan, and we shared a vision with Sharp of what we thought a future could be, what a device could be if we worked on something that could create this park experience. And they were enthusiastic. So we worked together and we created 100 prototypes that used a variety of technologies to simulate the experience we wanted people to have. We had an infrared system because GPS didn't really work that well, so we could know where we were exactly and create location content. We had extra memory so that we could have the card and the camera, which was a problem. And we built a special housing and an audio earplug so that you could have a sound experience. Then Alan also allowed that his incredible programming team that were dedicated to continuing his research could work with us on that project. And with that, he shared the object-oriented programming language that he had continued to develop. And that language was the foundation for the app development environments that we know today in iOS and in Android. And then we combined that with really talented Disney visual artists who wanted to create rich media and an immersive experience. And really fascinating, we learned that the way the software worked was that it would create a separate little application for each of the different environments that we wanted to go in, and each one of those could be thought about differently. And we worked for about a year, and then in November of 2000, we went down to Walt Disney World. Wonderful thing about the Disney company, they own a place about the size of Manhattan, and we were able to just kind of control it and make it into what we wanted. So we put infrared emitters around where we needed to so we could have location-based content. We solicited people as they came into the park, asked them if they wanted to participate in this experience, and gave them a short tutorial on how the interface worked. So this is something we see every day now, but that was the first time I ever had seen this. There were people who were walking around and they were staring down at a screen at the same time. And the people who operated the parks were horrified. They weren't looking at the park, they were looking at this stuff on this little device. And they thought that this was a really bad thing. But people were having a great time. We had hosts that would show up if you walked into a new area of the park. This was an African mask host that would tell you about the area you just got into. Families would stop and take a look at the content, share it around together. We had put in a system because we wanted to be able to get very fine resolution of location content. We came up with a symbol system. In this case, there was the bamboo stake with the little shapes on it, and if you simply typed those into the screen, it would give you information about what was right in front of you. And we thought we could improve the park map. The park map, of course, is something that has a long tradition. You can kind of see people hassling with trying to take a look at it together. We took a pass at making one that we thought could be better on this digital device. You could quickly locate different things, zoom in, but it turns out it really didn't work well because we still hadn't invented finger pinch zoom. And I thought that was magic the first time I saw it. So picture taking was the really amazing thing, though, is that people loved to take pictures. We had put in a simple system that would let you take a bunch of pictures. You had a photo roll. You could decide which ones you were going to keep. And once again, we saw a behavior that we'd never seen before. Today, it's normal to see somebody holding up a little screen rectangle and they take pictures. But at that time, it was completely new. And we had games because people got bored when they were waiting in queue lines, and they could play games that would enrich in the understanding of the characters and the experience they were having in the park. So when people got home, they had a URL, and they could put that number in, and there were their pictures online, and they could revisit them. So 2 weeks, 800 guests, including guests that came from our corporate partners and staff from major computer companies. We continued working with Sharp, and we came up with what we thought was the next product we could do together. But it didn't really go forward. And one of the reasons that didn't go forward is that we had corporate partners at the company. The Disney company had a long tradition of what they called photo spots in the park. And it was a way for them to promote the use of their film and the one-time use cameras that they sold. And at that time, Kodak told us that that 8% of the photos that were developed in the country had a Disney park in the background. So it was a big part of their business. And after a while, sort of nothing happened. And the software team decided that they wanted to share what we'd done, and so they wrote a paper and they shared it with the object-oriented programming community, and that's kind of where the story went. So in 2003, this is still what the devices looked like, and it wouldn't be until about 2007 that we started to get really excited about what was going on, and clearly the change had kept happening. In 2010, Steve Jobs announced the first iPad, and I sent an email to Alan because I realized that 40 years had passed, and it was uncanny how close what he had envisioned in 1968 finally came out in 2010. And sometimes it takes that long because you can come out with great ideas of better experiences for people, but it has to be when everything is aligned correctly that it can really go forward. So I'm asked to talk to you about scalable value and strategic innovation today. I'm going to suggest that scalable value is all about trusted brand that connects deeply with customers. If you know how your brand connects with the people that are your customers, then you can continue to maintain that connection, and you can do all kinds of things, create new products, new opportunities, new services. When it comes to strategic innovation, I have a few things I would suggest that I think were illustrated here. I think it's really important that you have the ability to see the bigger picture and keep your eye on it. Anticipate future context, and timing is really important. It's always good to be lucky with that. You need to plan for change, design several moves ahead, and experiment and test, experiment and test. And this is really what research and development is about, and companies that I think invest heavily in R&D are providing themselves a window to the future through this process. Organizations that are built for change are super important as well, and they have some important characteristics. They have an alignment of internal value systems, and in the example I showed you, my boss was telling us to invent the future and avoid subtlety at all costs. But the corporate relations division was trying to make long-term contracts with companies that didn't necessarily have the same value and reward. Management needs to have foresight. They need to be able to see forward and understand where they need to take things, and they need to have the ability to pivot. Xerox Corporation is one of the companies that was in this story, and they ended up completely missing the opportunity to become one of the biggest computer companies in the world because their own R&D department had designed the key components that could make that happen, but they didn't see how that made sense. And Kodak filed for Chapter 11 because they couldn't understand that digital technologies were going to change everything and not see themselves as the chemical company that they started as. And the other last lesson here is that I think innovation requires that we think in terms of balanced systems. It means that everything has to have human value that's evident. The technical feasibility has to be there. The technology has to be ready. The idea we had was almost a decade too early because the arrival of broadband hadn't really occurred, and some of the technologies, we couldn't even imagine that a camera could ever get that small. And you need to have business value, and this is the place where designers usually don't do everything they need to do. They need to understand how to prove that the business value is there, because every company has competing interests of their time, and they're going to spend their time on the things that are most effective for their business growth. So we have a model we use in our graduate industrial design program, and it's a model we use because we try to have it as a framework so we can test ourselves as whether we're being thorough. And we kind of use it like this. Every project, every innovation context has a humanistic, a business, and a technology component. And with that, they also have usually multidisciplinary teams that have human, business, and technology cultures. And they have to work together. And the critical success happens in these spaces where those different activities overlap. And success lies in that tiny little triangle in the center, and it's hard to get to. If you can achieve a balance of all those aspects and sustain it over time, that's one way to think about a sustainable innovation. And finally, we kind of think of this as an organism, and once the balance is achieved, we need to think about it living within a greater market, a society, and an ecology. And the point is, in the multidisciplinary teams that we're going to work in, we're trying to train designers in our program to be the partner of choice that deeply understands the humanistic area, but understands how to function and complement other team members who are in these other spaces so that we can get the final result to go to this spot. Thank you very much.